The automotive industry is set for a revolution that will disrupt and reshape global business, threatening the survival of every organization. To make sure you survive and win in the new automotive game, Automotive Growth Expert Roberto Dal Corso has interviewed global experts from the automotive industry to identify the changes and the impacts that are coming to keep you ahead of the curve.
Good morning and welcome to the leading disruptive automotive trends from around the globe. Today we have a very special guest and a good friend and colleague all the way from the US, Gierahn, working for GM, but at the moment on holiday, usually in Detroit, today in Florida. So thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out, Eric. Welcome.
Well, thanks a lot, Robbie. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great, and thank you for making time on your vacation, so we'll be very mindful of that.
Sure, I think about half of my colleagues from Detroit are down in Florida right now, and so I think I've got a lot of company.
But Eric, if we kick off, looking at the automotive industry, I mean, you've been in the industry a while. How did you get into it?
Well, I mean, certainly right now, the last couple of years, I've been working directly with General Motors, one of the leading OEM world. Certainly, I've been around the, I'll call it periphery of the business my entire career. Started out in a company that built electronic for Caterpillars. All that kind of periphery, has four wheels in engine, at least some of the product that was in the electronics business for a long time. Went back to get my MBA and then moved to Detroit as part of one of the consulting firm I worked for called A.T. Kearney. I was in their global automotive and strategy practice for several years, and again worked around the automotive industry. And from there, after a few years, was fortunate enough to work with you at Meritor, which of course is a significant commercial vehicle supplier and axles and brakes, and did a lot of interesting work there as director of corporate strategy, and then had the opportunity to come and work directly within the automotive space here the last couple of years. And as we were talking just before we got started here, very interesting time to be involved in this industry with the disruption, the innovation going on. It's probably, as our CEO said, more changes in the next 5 years than probably in the last 50. So that was kind of an incentive to be part of this. So that's kind of my path to at least working directly at an OEM.
Yeah, no. And, I mean, you've had an exciting path, as you put it, and at the same time, I mean, what's been your main driver for success? I mean, I've gotten to know you reasonably well, and I'd love to know what you believe your main drivers for success are.
Well, I think it's a variety of things. I mean, certainly, I think it comes along with doing what you love to do and trying to follow that. And I followed a path that I think that has been one where you can combine your passions and your interests, and obviously at the end of the day you have to still deliver results. And I've been fortunate enough to have been given opportunities from different leaders at different companies. And so I think that all the success I've had, although there's certainly friends that are higher up in different companies, but I've kind of guided at least my career to again align with what I really like to do, and I think obviously delivering on what the company expects of you and your leaders expect of you, and you kind of piece all that together, and at the end of the day, hopefully you have an enjoyable career, and have a chance to be around some great colleagues, as you and I had a chance to work together quite some time in Switzerland. So anyway, so that's another, I'll call it, piece of my career that I've gained a lot from, and it just adds to the context you can bring to the companies you work for, and again, try to have a little fun along the way.
Well, I can only, comment on that because, I mean, since I've known you, you're absolutely passionate, 150% about the automotive industry, whether it's car or truck, and I know you love cars outside, but we'll maybe talk about that later on. You're absolutely professional in what you do, how you go about doing it. And, to me, one of the things that sticks to mind is the personal relationships you've built with, the people you've worked with.
Yeah, that's true too. I think it's whenever I've had a chance to engage with whether it's people that work for me, and trying to coach them, and ultimately, the teams I've had, I want them to be able to replace me, which I think is kind of what you want to strive for. But mutual respect and understanding of people's different positions. In the case where I've worked in various areas around the world, I was just in China for 3 weeks. Obviously, we spent time together in Switzerland, lived in Brussels for about a half a year, working on a different variety of projects there with people all around Europe. But it's also respecting different points of view, people's opinions. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to get and drive to a solution, but and along the way, building great relationships, and that's how we've stayed to get to know each other.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I've got friends, that I've worked with that I can reach out to via LinkedIn or what have you from around the world, and I think that's from building a mutual, relationship and partnership, and doing great things together. So I think that's, yes, to your point, I think this is certainly another thing that is extremely important to me. And something that you take with you forever. So
yeah, no, you're a true professional and an amazing friend, I must say. But over the years that you've been in the industry, you must have seen some pretty drastic changes. And I mean, where do you foresee the automotive industry going in general at a high level at the moment?
Yeah, it's certainly I've seen a lot of changes. And I think, as I was mentioning earlier, our CEO at my company has stated things like, we'll see more change in the next 5 years than the last 50. So, for the automotive industry right now, everyone's, there's, you've got new entrants coming in from a technology perspective because of the push towards autonomy. New entrants from all different aspects of industry. I mean, you've got tech players, things like Google/Waymo. Apple's been dillying in some things with Project Titan, although no one's exactly sure what they're doing. You've got companies like NVIDIA, which was traditionally a video game company, provider of parts in that space, who are now building, autonomous compute platforms. So you've got a lot of these entrants from, we'll call it Silicon Valley kind of thing. And then you've got, of course, the traditional OEMs, which are trying to figure out how to partner, how to develop their own, what do they do. And then you've got, in addition to that, you've always kind of had the Chinese players, which of course have not really entered the market per se, at least with their own brands, and at least in the US. I think they've dabbled a little bit in other areas. But so you've got that kind of going on as well. So you've kind of got a variety of different players coming into the market, trying to disrupt, a business that's been, fairly stable for at least a while. I mean, of course, the Koreans came in back in at least the United States in the 80s and so forth, which have, continued to mix things up. The Japanese, if you go back to like the late 60s and early 70s. But so you've got a lot of competition, and it's, as we've talked about, I think the autonomous piece is really the part that really is, I think, one of the most intriguing pieces of it. And then what we talk about mobility is the other piece of it is, people need to get from point A to point B, and how do they do that? And so then mixed modes, you've got personal cars, you've got public transportation, which is a variety of different things. Uber and Lyft and those things is the other disruptor I mentioned earlier, but certainly they're crucial in this conversation as well. And no one really knows where it's all going to fall out, but companies such as mine are trying to make investments in the right technology areas, and you've got a brand called Maven, which we're using as kind of part of mobility services. At the same time, all the OEMs have to still invest in their core business, which is what, at least right now, is still continues to pay for everything. So we still got to launch great vehicles, vehicles people want to buy, at the same time making the investments for the future when things continue to evolve. So,
Yeah.
so all the things are happening right now, and and then the last piece of it, really, from a disruption standpoint, is the propulsion system. Of course, everyone's talking about electric vehicles, hybridization, that sort of thing. Tesla, of course, is probably one of the leaders in that space. So, again, there's more investments being made there, and how electrified will the portfolio of vehicles become in the future? How fast are battery costs going to come down? What's the battery technology will take over? All those kind of things. So you've got, kind of the whole piece around mobility. You've got competition. You've got the powertrains themselves.
Yeah.
Happening all at once. So it's, you talk about a lot of dynamics happening, and of course in this industry, as you know, you're placing billion-dollar bets on different things, and trying to figure out which way to go. So the strategic vision for the companies and trying to make sure investing and moving in the right direction critical, because the thing people talk about is the Kodak moment. You don't want to have one of those where all of a sudden you wake up one day and everything's moved to digital, and you're still making film. Although Kodak has found its niche in certain areas, but the point, it's to be part of that, is really interesting and exciting, and be able to bring your perspectives to a company to kind of guide some of that is a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I like what you said, because, you mentioned, the four mega trends, if I can put them that way, whether it's, the autonomous driving, of course, the electric vehicles, the car sharing, and the connectivity. So those are the, really at a high level, the four mega trends. But as you rightfully mentioned, I mean, when you go back, it's not the traditional car manufacturers that are leading this. It's really all the new players coming into the market, the Ubers, the Googles, the Teslas, and the likes, which are coming in and disrupting this market and making things, unfortunately, for General Motors and for all the other vehicle manufacturers, very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And the good thing, I think, at least from my perspective, is I wear my company hat for, and what I see is, I think the leadership within our company has got a pretty good vision of what we want to be and how we want to execute to it.
Yeah.
Whereas some, I think, have not come across with a clear enough strategy yet. So I think that we've been kind of in the forefront. I mean, obviously, we launched our Bolt, which is was really the first true affordable EV with some level of range, which we sell. I think it's the e-Ampera, I think, in Europe, which is now different because of Opel, as we're trying to focus on. Obviously, our company's decision is to focus on where we got a profitable future, and that was a piece we decided to move away from. But yeah, it's we certainly, on one hand, I think we're doing there's a lot of great things we're doing, but I have a lot of respect for all these other companies that are pushing the industry to do things that otherwise we may not have done.
Yeah.
And so, a guy like Musk, obviously a great visionary, doing a lot of neat things. I think they're trying to figure out how they're going to make money, and they're on a path to that. But it's an exciting place to be, and we are certainly trying to understand what all of our competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Trying to I think where we've got, and what we've stated is, we've got we've been building stuff for, building in high volumes for over 100 years. So that manufacturing platform and the ability to execute, and as you well know, the automotive industry, you got a lot of automotive grade everything.
Yeah.
I kind of kid around sometimes. I say, well, when your phone goes dead, that's one thing, but when the car goes dead, that's a whole different thing. So having that automotive grade, if you want to call it that, sense of validation and quality requirements is something we know how to build stuff, because we've been doing it for 100 years.
Yeah.
So I think, but then on the news side, we're learning a lot of that too, and of course you get into war for talent and all those kind of other interesting things that are going on too. So
Yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, I think your company's been one of the unique ones because, as you mentioned, great vision. You know where you want to go, and I think it's being absolutely executed to perfection, which is very different to a lot of other manufacturers out there at the moment. I mean, recently a German and a leading Japanese one were discussing, saying, well, with all these uncertainties going on, we're not sure if we're going to survive. And these were two major OEM brands. So, if the big guys are worried, I mean, when you get down, to smaller manufacturers and suppliers, how are these guys managing these uncertainties today?
oh yeah, that of course is a big question.
How prepared are you to navigate the disruptive trends that are set to hit your business? Will you survive and win in the coming years? To understand your level of risk exposure and to help you avoid becoming a statistic of failure, take the free risk assessment here, www.dalcorsogroup.com, which will identify the gaps and how to navigate the risks. By taking the risk assessment, you get a chance to win a free 30-minute strategy session with Automotive Growth Expert Roberto Dal Corso. Roberto can help you identify an amount equivalent to 7% of your total annual sales that you are leaving on the table each year. To survive and win, take action now and visit www.dalcorsogroup.com.
The supply base, they are also trying to figure out what their future holds as well. Obviously, as you said, I mean, if you're a traditional powertrain manufacturer, the engine space doing what have you, kind of go, well, okay, especially because obviously electrification would have a significant impact to them. What future do they have? And it's a difficult question. I don't know how to answer it. What I would say is, I think that without a doubt, the industry is rapidly changing, but at the same time, I'm not quite sure. As you think about some of the way the media kind of portrays things, I mean, we kind of kid around when I was actually at an autonomous vehicles conference in California about a month ago, and one of the guys said, yeah, people talk about we're all going to be in autonomous cars, ride sharing, within the next decade, and and I kind of looked at it and go, really? Have you been to Wisconsin? Kind of thing in the middle of got trucks and so I think that while this change is going to happen fairly quickly, and things are going to happen faster than people sometimes think. Of course, regulatory and there's regulatory hurdles to a lot of this stuff as well. I do think that there is going to be the internal combustion is going to still be around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I think like when we think about our vehicle platform, yes, we're going to have autonomous technology. Yes, we're going to have battery BEVs as we invest in the future. But I think it's going to be a balance of that stuff. And so as you think about the supply base, I think that they're in a tough spot. But I think that they're also going to see this technology change. But if they're forward enough thinking, they'll be able to see how things are kind of moving as they are now. Try to understand where they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And continue to do that while they look at what competencies they have as a company and say, hey, here's a new space that we can play in and kind of go from there. And I mean, I'll use our example of our former company. I saw they invested in kind of electrified axle, a small electrified axle company. Okay, well they used to do they continue to do great work in brakes and axles, but they realize there's a future there. So making those investments there and leveraging this kind of startup, start a smaller company and bring a competency, of a 100-year-old company again, as our former company is, to bear there. So I think that's kind of what the smart suppliers are going to be doing. Is what do we do well? How does what we do well leverage into some of this new technology space? Be on the lookout for as all the OEMs are doing. We're looking at all these small companies saying, what should we help incubate as far as some of these other companies and bring those in-house appropriately, and then kind of adapt to the future. So I think that's about the best answer you could probably come up with. But it's going to be I think what the automotive space, I think something that for supports through everything 1 in 9 jobs or something, I think in the U.S. at least. If you look at companies, the tier ones all the way down to the tier structure, and then what they support from an economic perspective. So it's a huge impact to society and what kind of happens here. And I think all of us are trying to make sure we stay ahead of the game and plan for the future. So.
Yeah. No, those are very, very wise words. And, and I like what you mentioned about, the future is near, but is it really as near as it's made out to be in the press? Because, when you think of North America, you think of Europe, yes, we will certainly get to, autonomous driving. It will happen. It's a matter of time of when. But then you look at, whether it's Africa or South America, and then I think we're going to land up almost having a 2-speed automotive market in some countries where they just, will either take a lot longer or may not ever get there.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true too. When you think about other countries, I personally have been many places around the world, but I haven't been to India. But from what I have talked to colleagues who've been there, and also we talk to some of the experts and say, well, how does this technology in a country like that where essentially, in certain places you certainly have roads and road markings and things of that nature, but the rules of the road are very different than what you get, whether it's Switzerland or the U.S. or other parts of the world that are more developed. So it's a little bit like driving in anarchy, and how do you program for anarchy? Don't know. So as you said, I'd like to comment about the 2-speed world. There's certainly going to be use cases for it. And then there are going to be places where, we'll see how that goes. And again, the other thing that's interesting when you talk about disruption is the driver's situation. I think that I forgot what the statistic was. It was something fairly significant about number of, and I don't know if maybe it's in India or some of the emerging markets, but like the number of men in the working world that in some of those countries, it's like 1 in 10 males is a driver of some kind. They're driving a truck. They're driving people around because, again, I think as you've seen before, people even middle class stature and up typically will have a driver. But you look at all that and kind of go, and even so whether it's drivers in there, the truck drivers here in the U.S., millions of people, what do you do with all that? Really go autonomous. And so that's a whole other thing of what does society do with that? Do we retrain people? But again, as we talked about earlier, how fast will this really happen?
Yeah.
I think the technology, and you'll see it sooner than most people believe, but how well it will penetrate across the market, I think is not as aggressive as certainly some day. And so I think that's, kind of going back to what the suppliers do and so forth. It's moving quick, but I think at the same time, there'll be a measured change in things. And then, as you said, a certain country, at least for a while, that technology and is not going to play at all. Same thing. It's electrified vehicles or autonomous vehicles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that is true. And when we talk about the 2-speeder, I just remembered it was the CEO of Siemens who recently, I think it was in February at the Davos forum, mentioned, you will have autonomous driven vehicles as well as potentially burning vehicles. And not because that they were unsafe, but it was purely because of, this 2-speed industry, not just across countries, but also within the country. Because again, we talk about, the passenger car side, you guys are the leaders, you'll get there much faster. You look at the truck side, or even further down the road, the aftermarket truck side, it's coming, but at the moment, the key trends are nothing to do with electric drive and autonomous driving. It's all about customer consolidation, digitalization, pricing, and so forth. So it's you've got different speeds within the revolution of the autonomous, of the automotive industry at the moment.
was when we were again, I'll refer to this autonomous conference I was at in California a month ago, and there were representatives there from Volvo Trucks, PACCAR, other technology guys, and a company called Peloton, which they've got platooning technology.
Yeah.
You may have heard of them, but they were all having kind of a discussion. Oh, and Trucks.com, I was the moderator, but they were talking about the commercial vehicle space and how this might affect them. And, again, kind of go to the media going, well, what's going to happen when in 10 years all the truck drivers are gone? And it's like, well, no, that's really not going to probably happen. What they really said is it's more about, not necessarily about autonomous driving, but it's more around automation of some of the driving functions. So, I mean, as you and I know, that we've pretty much gone to automated manual transmissions, for instance, at least in the U.S., and to make driving easier because it's harder to get drivers. But the point was they were making is going to make driving an easier task for a lot of the drivers. But, you don't quite necessarily get stepped that quickly into, 80,000 pound things going down the highway by themselves. I think the public's going to be, pretty, for that legislatively to happen and for the public to kind of accept that's going to be a while, as well as the technology, and then how do you manage, things that are going down the highway and then, go to, an off the road port where you hook into another vehicle that'll take it to its final destination, or who knows. But anyway, the point was that it's not necessarily the first step of this is going to be going from where we are today to just, trucks running by themselves. It's more around automation to help support the driver in an environment that, is not an easy one. You've got to, they've got to be alert and do what they're doing for, long periods of time. And it's to really kind of ease some of that burden. So that's kind of their perspective, at least Volvo, PACCAR, and some of the folks we talked about there. So, so it's just, and like I said, it's going to be interesting as you get into the peripheral of automotive, because there's so many other things. You've got obviously hundreds of millions of vehicles on the road today around the world, and they're all not going to be part of that ecosystem anytime soon. So you're going to have this mixed mode, and then how does that all happen as well?
No, it certainly is exciting times. And then, as you rightfully mentioned, I think if you then take human behavior in there, at the end of the day, when a delivery vehicle arrives, you still want to speak to a driver. You still want to speak to a person and interface with a person and not just a vehicle. So I think human behavior will slow it down also.
Yeah, certainly you've got that aspect to it as well. I know Ford is doing some, I think here in Florida, in Miami actually, they're doing autonomous pizza delivery with Domino's or something, and you've seen the vehicle. They put it in the car, it's got a little door that comes down, you like barcode or something, and you pick your pizza up. But at the same time, it's like, okay, it's kind of cool, but you have to actually go out of your house and go down to the vehicle where, pizza man comes right to your door. So, okay, I can get that, but
I think it's the newness factor.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, to see something come up your door and do that, it's kind of cool. But at the same time, it's actually less convenient, at least for the consumer. Going, I have to walk out to the vehicle to get my pizza.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, not as much fun. But I mean, John, jumping back to General Motors, I mean, you guys, before we started, you were busy telling me about one of your vehicles that is, I'm trying to think of the exact words you used, has a highway module or mode that you can drive, and it's virtually autonomous for motorways.
Yeah, that's Cadillac has a system called Super Cruise, which I've had the fortunate opportunity to drive or pilot or whatever you want to call it. But basically, it's as you said, it's the world's first on-highway autonomous driving, hands-free autonomous driving system. Hands-free being kind of the key word there. Mainly, how the system in general works is within North America here. We've GM has a high-definition maps that we've done for 160,000 miles worth of divided highway. So information, high accuracy GPS, and the sensor suite that's on the vehicle, it allows people to actually engage in hands-free driving on the highway. And the thing that's kind of different with our technology versus kind of Tesla's technology, in one part, is that theirs, at least from my understanding, is it requires you to put your hand on the steering wheel every so often to know that, okay, there's a person there, which can be overridden. People on YouTube will hang a bottle from it, kind of that sort of thing. But with ours, it actually is a camera mounted in the steering column that's looking at your face and looking at, eye movement and that sort of thing, and where you're paying attention. And so it's really just making sure that you are paying attention to the road every X amount of seconds. And then there's an LED actually embedded in the steering wheel that if you, first of all, in order for you to engage, you have to be on the right road, you have to be looking ahead, and then there's a little icon that comes in the dashboard that looks like a little steering wheel, and it allows you to engage this Super Cruise system. And basically, what way I would describe it is it's kind of like adaptive cruise control with steering is essentially what it is. So then it just will essentially, it doesn't lane change, so that's one thing it doesn't do yet. So, but once you set it the lane and set it at the speed, it'll continue and maintain that speed up to, I think, 80 miles an hour, but down to 0. So it will actually drive rush hour traffic and things of that nature. So that's what we've got. And it was interesting because Johan Denijsen, our president of Cadillac, was actually talking about it at the Autonomous Vehicles Conference, and he said there's a couple things we're doing, small enhancements right now. He said one thing is if you couldn't engage it, it would just say Super Cruise unavailable. And people go, well, it's broken or what's wrong, but they've kind of bucketed into like 10 different things that could be happening, why it's not working.
Yeah.
For instance, on a road that's not mapped. Oh, okay. Or there's some sort of sensors or, got something on them, that sort of thing. But anyway, so that's one enhancement we're going to make is actually telling the driver what's going on, why it can't be engaged.
Yeah.
The other thing that was interesting was the way we all drive today is we naturally, I guess, and when we're passing, for instance, semi-trucks, kind of move to the left of the large vehicles to kind of round them, just do it inherently. And the way Super Cruise was designed was to stay in the center of the lane. And so what they're actually going to do is they're actually going to enable the car to shift slightly around large vehicles to kind of give people a more natural way they drive.
Yeah.
So that's an example. So that's really the system we've got. I'll call it a semi-autonomous system.
Wow.
We don't classify it as a level 2 or level 3. We kind of just classify it as what it is. And so that's, I'll call it one piece of what we're doing, and it's actually available here in the U.S. and in Canada today. So in addition to that, of course, we have Cruise, which is a company that General Motors bought a couple of years ago, where we're really using Cruise as the development and brand we're putting autonomous into. So that's a whole other piece of the investment that our company is doing.
Nice. I mean, no, that certainly sounds like an amazing system. I haven't seen it in Europe yet. I'd love to see it and give it a go someday. That would be a lot of fun. You mentioned all the sensors, because I guess, sensors become a key major part to the vehicle now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, certainly one of the biggest pieces of the cost, other than sort of the compute platform that has to do the calculations to be able to read all these sensors simultaneously and then make decisions about it. Because it's basically read, decipher, and then react. It's kind of how it's working. But yeah, the sensor suite is, everyone's trying to define what it is we all need. I mean, again, going back to, I think, Tesla, their current vehicles don't have a LiDAR system, which is, essentially radar with light. And most everyone else has kind of said, we think in order to make this happen, we really need to have this as an additional piece, in addition to, ultrasonics, which are real small, real close in, and then short range radar, medium range radar, long range radar, and then the LiDAR sensing. And then LiDAR, of course, is a really expensive technology, at least in certain applications. Velodyne being the one you a lot of times see, the spinning Velodyne LiDARs. But GM recently purchased a company called Strobe, which is a LiDAR development company, and so that's also something we're looking at. But basically, we're trying to, all this stuff, the sensors, the view platform, you're dealing with, in some cases, technologies that have been around a while. Ultrasonics have been around a long time. Radar, to a certain extent, technology's been around a long time. But for automotive applications, it's a little bit more recent. But of course, with all this, we're with the scale, and trying to continue to push the cost level to a point where it makes sense. All that's happening right now, and LiDAR is probably the biggest open question for everybody right now. I saw Volvo's presentation around sensors, and they said the same thing. I think a lot of people are saying is LiDAR is the one thing where one LiDAR sensor today could be $10,000 kind of thing. And how do you get that to an automotive grade, something that functions in that way that can be actually packaged in an appropriate way? So companies like what electronics company, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but they integrate into the lighting system, kind of some solid state LiDAR. So anyway, all that's kind of happening, and so that's kind of the space I work in within the sensing side, and so we're engaged obviously with engineering and purchasing and our program teams, in some of this technology to figure out, what direction are things going in, where are we going to get at a cost point where it makes sense to continue to increase the capacity of these sensors, including obviously visual sensors, cameras. So and then all those sensors that you got to have duplicativeness, and they have to maintain their cleanliness and all that kind of stuff. Then all that stuff has to come into the compute platform, and then it has to look at all that and make an assessment about what needs to be done. So, I think the technology is. I think what Bill said about autonomous is the technology really is not going to be the hurdle, because it's certainly the way I view it is. I think it's making the business case for this thing to work. Because sure, you can put $250,000 worth of sensors on your car, but who's going to buy that other than for small scale type applications? So it's really the business case, which is really the cost, and I think it's also what it says, what's the consumer willing to do or pay, and then the other piece is the regulatory environment. Where will we be able to operate these things? At what point will the public and the government have trust in these things? Of course, there were some recent accidents that kind of pulled some of that into question, and rightfully so. So I think the technology will probably be ahead of the regulatory environment and the business case to make these things successful. So.
True. And one, I know you're on holiday, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I'm going to put you on the spot. How many sensors on a vehicle today, then?
There's probably, it depends on it, but I think there's usually there's at least about 20 sensors on a vehicle, of various types. You've got a couple of, depending on, again, some of them with LiDAR, I think ours have, I think 2 of them or 3 of them, I think on the side. Then you've got a variety of short-range, long-range radars, ultrasonic sensors, cameras. So you've got all that different things. So you've probably got on average 20 different things looking at the environment around. And then the other thing that's happening, you have redundancy, or they call it ASIL D, I believe, is kind of a safety protocol that built into a lot of these components. And so there's duplicativeness in it, but you've got to have computers running simultaneously that are checking each other to make sure that it's not doing something wrong. So you've got all that thing happening. So there's some great data out there, which I'll be happy to share with you about that I've seen about some technology and where things are going. But like I said, I think it was interesting at CES. I was at CES in January, and we talk about LiDAR as the one I think that's the most evolving. Is you run across like these small companies that just, we've got a LiDAR solution. There's like 20 LiDAR companies. So there's a lot of consolidation is going to happen, but it's certainly a technology that I think most companies believe that they need to integrate.
Yeah.
But what the end solution or the solution set looks like, I think is up for grabs now. We can't, companies aren't going to be able to put, $20,000, $30,000 worth of LiDARs on their car and that to be a long-term solution. No one believes that. So.
Yeah. No, I think, what you were saying there, it's certainly interesting of how you go about making the business case, because you've got the technology is there, but extremely expensive. You've got regulations which are not quite there. And then you've got all the possibilities of hacking in and the connectivity and where that might go. So when you've put that all together, it really is, you're investing a huge amount of money now and not quite sure where it's going to go to in the future. It's going approximately, but you're not quite sure exactly. So it's amazing how you guys put that all together and make the business case. I mean, that to me is very interesting how you do that.
Yeah, and I think with all strategy, it's, as a guy who was in corporate strategy for a while, it's not always time the decisions you make, it's the decisions that you decide where not to do things. And that's almost as critical as what you decide to do. I remember one of the guys we worked with at our company, he was using the analogy of a plane ticket. There's a plane that's got, 100 seats on it, and only 100 people get a ticket. And there's a lot of people who aren't going to get a ticket, and you can use that analogy for projects and so on and so forth. So I think that's figuring out who gets on the plane and then who doesn't get on the plane is just as important. And saying we're going to leave that to the side. And so obviously, as all of our companies are trying to make sure we are well prepared and investing in the right things in the future, there's a lot of smart people involved in most of our companies to try and help guide those decisions. And unfortunately, I think with my company, there's been a lot of great leadership and communication all the way through the ranks to say this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to get there, and creating a vision so that we can follow that and really try to execute on it. So,
No, that's the key to the strategy. Have the vision, communicate it, and go out and execute on it. And you've done it for so many years, and I've seen you in action, and it's been brilliant. And I've learned a lot from you.
Well, we've learned a lot from each other.
Well, just changing gear, and then I won't keep you too much more of your time. Passions outside of the corporate automotive industry.
Passions are really, part of the reason I went down this path was because, as you said earlier, that's what I enjoy. I mean, you probably know this, but I just bought a new Corvette in December, so I've always had some high performance cars. I had a LB GT500. I had a high powered Camaro called the CL1, and so I just bought a Corvette in December. Been a dream since I was a little kid. So I actually had a chance to do a track day out in Las Vegas here right before I was in California. So yeah, I like to have fun with cars, so that's kind of a cool thing. Because we were earlier, when am I going to look for an autonomous Corvette? Not but I could see some of those features helping me in traffic. But so is that. Obviously, travel. Obviously, I'm here in Florida right now with my family, which is my other passion. It's just that you and I both have wonderful families, and spending time with our kids, our wives, and that, and enjoying life. And then just for me, it's also just technology. So whether that's automotive technology or consumer technology, that sort of thing, it's always been another passion of mine. So so this job that I've had and the jobs I've had, the career I've had, has been fun because most of the time I've been involved with either my own company or consulting with companies that are developing new things, and it's exciting to be part of that development process, the decision-making process. Where can you use this stuff for the future?
Yeah.
And so for all those things, it's been a fun ride so far. Right? hopefully a few more years to go yet. But yeah, so that's again, family, travel, technology, automotive, and then the other thing is I'm a motorcycle guy too. So I own a Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
I bought a different one here last year.
Okay.
Models Harley, it's kind of an old school. It's called the Road King Classic, but it's all blacked out and slammed and kind of got a dark green military kind of finish on it. But,
Nice.
But I'm traveling around in that and did 8 days around Lake Superior, which is 2,500 kilometers, I guess, around
Wow.
the lake. For me, that's engine power. I know, Robbie, you're an avid bicyclist. And I thought of you, actually, real quick. I was on the north side of Lake Superior, and I'd been gone, 4 or 5 days. And I was at this truck stop, and there was a gentleman having lunch next to me, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And I said, so I heard him on the phone. He was talking to someone, and I could tell he was traveling. And I said, so are you on a bike? He said, yeah, I'm on a bike. I said, well, where did you come from? He said, I came from Vancouver, out in the Pacific Ocean, and I'm traveling to all the way to the East Coast, all the way up to the Atlantic Ocean. I forgot exactly where. And I thought, wow, that's a motorcycle trip, right? It's all the way across the North American continent. And so I said, what kind of bike do you have? I just have a regular road bike. I said, okay. And I thought, I don't know what kind of brand it is. Is it a Triumph? So anyway, I didn't think much about it. And I walk outside and I realized he's actually on a bicycle, a road bicycle, and he's traveling across the North American continent. I thought, oh my gosh, I bet Robbie would be doing this. So anyway, when I thought, I think I'm doing something where I'm on a motorized bike going around. And he was going across the entire North American continent. But it was interesting to see a lot of, there was actually a lot of bicyclists out there. They take Trans-Canada Highway across the entire continent and spend obviously a couple, I don't know how long it takes, several weeks. But holy cow. Anyway, so that's some different things I do for fun. And actually I do enjoy bicycling as well, just not to those distances. So I've got an e-bike. Again, I'm a technology junkie.
Yeah.
My wife and I have an e-bike now as well, so we were in Colorado e-biking around and saving my knees and from the hills, as well as I wish I was in a little bit better shape. But anyway, so we have.
No, so you really are enjoying horsepower, electric power, anything with power. You enjoying the technology that goes with it.
Absolutely.
Are we going to see you over in Europe again soon, Eric?
I hope so. I think the unfortunate thing is, of course, with my company selling Opel, I was hoping to get over there, as I've now gotten a chance to go to China. We've still got presence in Korea, and I was hoping to get over to Rüsselsheim, but that's kind of changed now. But we still have presence in Korea, in Italy. Our diesel development folks are there, but who knows? I've been making some connections with some other suppliers and things that are over in Europe. Of course, it's a global automotive supply base.
Yeah.
A lot of suppliers in Europe. So my hope is that I'll get to dovetail into that, find a weekend, or some way to get around and perhaps making my way down to Switzerland again, because it's absolutely one of the most beautiful places in the world, and visiting you has always been a terrific experience.
Yeah.
The chances to again would be great. So.
Yeah. Now, well, if you're ever over in Europe on your own or with the family, you have to let me know. We'll get together wherever it is.
I'm sure we would do that. Absolutely.
Now, Eric, you go back to the family. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Robbie.
Thanks, Eric. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope that you have enjoyed and found value in watching this interview. If you want to learn more about the leading disruptive automotive trends impacting the industry, check out www.dalcorsogroup.com. I encourage you to share it with colleagues that will appreciate great industry insights. Join us tomorrow for more experts from around the world.